Number 10. Aztec Skull Sacrifice. In recent years, archaeologists unearthed a circular tower made from hundreds of human skulls beneath modern-day Mexico City. The Tower of Skulls was found at the ancient city of Tenochtitlan. Known as the Zompantli, the structure measures 16.4 feet in diameter. It dates back to the 15th and early 16th centuries and is dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec god of war, sun, and human sacrifice. At least 603 skulls have been found so far. Many of them belong to warriors, while others were probably the skulls of men, women, and even children who were sacrificed to the Aztec gods. Biological anthropologist Rodrigo Bolanos said that it was unusual to find children's skulls at the site. In fact, it was something archaeologists had not come across before. Sacrificial victims were considered sacred gifts to the gods and were sometimes even seen as personifications of the deities, and human sacrifices were a daily ritual in Mesoamerica. The Aztecs displayed freshly severed heads on zompantli, or skull racks. After they were done being exhibited, the skulls were transferred to the tower. Hernan Cortés and the Spanish conquistadors he led on his conquest of Tenochtitlan in 1521 witnessed human sacrifices and were reportedly horrified by the practice. Researchers believe that the Zompantli is one of 7 similar structures that once stood in the area, based on the contemporary accounts of the cities captured by Cortés. They believe the conquistadors destroyed the other structures. Number 9. 9 Neanderthals. Earlier this year, Italy's Cultural Ministry announced that the remains of 9 Neanderthals were found in a cave near Rome. One individual died between 90 and 100,000 years ago, and the 8 others perished sometime between 50 and 68,000 years ago. 7 of them were adult males, 1 was an adult female, and 1 was a young boy. It appears as though several of them were hunted and killed by hungry hyenas, who dragged the bodies back to their den and ate them. A collapse sealed off the cave for tens of thousands of years and preserved the remains inside by protecting them from the elements. Alongside the Neanderthals, archaeologists found traces of vegetables and numerous animals, including rhinos, giant deer, horses, and hyenas. Speaking with The Guardian, Tor Vergata University professor Mario Rolfo explained the hyenas targeted sick, elderly, and otherwise vulnerable Neanderthals. A dental examination revealed that the group had a varied diet, but mostly ate cereal. Rolfo and his colleagues planned to analyze the individual's DNA to learn more about their lifestyle and circumstances. The Neanderthals are largely shrouded in mystery, despite numerous discoveries being made in recent years. Experts don't know why they went extinct around 40,000 years ago, what our exact relationship was with them, or what their migration patterns were. Advancing DNA technology and new discoveries are greatly helping when it comes to better understanding the Neanderthals, but it will likely be some time before all the pieces of the puzzle come together accordingly. Number 8. Prehistoric eggshell. A farmer named Antonio Jose Nievas encountered an unexpected Christmas surprise in 2015 when he spotted what looked like a partially exposed shell laying in the mud on his property in Argentina. He began digging around it and unearthed what he thought was a dinosaur egg. After finding the black, scaly object, Nievas reported the discovery to his wife, who told news agency AFP, and that everyone initially thought he was joking and laughed. Well, it turned out that Nievas was wrong about the artifact being a dinosaur egg. He had nevertheless found something incredible. Experts identified the fossilized egg as belonging to the giant ancestor of the modern-day armadillo, known as a glyptodont. Paleontologist Alejandro Kramars explained that it's common in the region to find fossils of the animal, which went extinct thousands of years ago. The specimen that Nievas discovered was around 10,000 years old, which makes it relatively young, according to Kramars. Glyptodonts evolved into existence around 20 million years ago. They lived throughout South America for tens of millions of years and spread to North America at some point after the 2 continents became connected. The creatures died out at the end of the last ice age, along with most other megafauna or super large animals in the Americas. Number 7. Sewer full of infant graves. Infanticide is the act of deliberately killing a baby. It's something most people avoid thinking about and find appalling, understandably so. Archaeologists on Israel's southern coast had no choice but to confront this disturbing reality in 1988. when they unearthed the bones of nearly 100 infants in the ancient port city of Ashkelon. The skeletons were found in a sewer beneath the ancient bathhouse, dating back to the late Roman and early Byzantine eras. It was the largest mass grave of infants ever discovered. The babies died when they were practically newborns. None of them lived to be more than a week old, and the bodies were discarded into the pit shortly after their deaths. Their remains lacked any sign of disease or deformities, and they appeared to be healthy when they died. The deceased infants were found among animal bones, pottery fragments, coins, and garbage. They weren't given a funeral or laid to rest with any grave goods. Experts believe that the babies were the victims of exposure, a Roman custom of getting rid of unwanted and sick babies by leaving them unattended and letting the gods decide their fate. The Romans did not consider newborns to be fully human, and they saw it as a parent's right to commit infanticide. According to forensic anthropologist Patricia Smith, and girls were killed disproportionately because they were often viewed as burdens, while boys were valued both as heirs and for their ability to support their family in old age. Yet the bones in the pit at Ashkelon were mostly male. But why? Erotic pottery fragments and a sign found at the site that says, "Enter and enjoy," suggest that the bathhouse the sewer is beneath doubled as a brothel. Prostitution was common in the Roman world, and the babies were likely the unwanted children of sex workers. Number 6. Burlington Bunker. In 1955, the British government built a sprawling 35-acre underground property called the Burlington Bunker. It was kept completely hidden from the public, including the local population, who had no idea that there was a top-secret bunker sitting 100 feet beneath the churches, homes, and quaint cobblestone streets of Wiltshire. Built during the Cold War, the facility was designed to enable government employees to continue working in the event of a nuclear attack. It was bomb-proof, radiation-proof, and poison gas-proof. For 30 years, the site was home to England's second-largest phone exchange, although the system was never used. The Burlington Bunker could accommodate up to 4,000 central government employees at any time, and was equipped to support them for up to 3 months with no outside contact. It even had its own water treatment facility and was supplied with water from a nearby lake. Designed for both working and living, the site had kitchens, offices, laundry facilities, supply rooms, cafeterias, a hospital, and more. There was also a television studio that the government could broadcast public messages from if the need arose. The bunker itself measured over a mile long and had over 60 miles of roads and a secret rail line connecting it to the main railway. But the facility was never used, and by the time it finally closed, it was being run by just 4 Ministry of Defense employees. Its existence was finally declassified in 2004. The Burlington Bunker's future remains uncertain as it sits frozen in time. Some people are fighting to save it, while others believe that it should be repurposed. Number 5. Missing couple found after 75 years. Marcelin Dumoulin and his wife Francine set off on foot one day in 1942 to feed their animals in the Swiss Alps. They never returned to their village, Savies, leaving their 7 children to wonder what could have possibly happened to them. Custody of the kids was split up among several local families, and the children had no choice but to move on with their lives. The mystery was finally put to rest in 2017, when a ski lift worker discovered the couple's bodies wedged into an alpine glacier at 8,580 feet above sea level. He initially thought he had spotted some rocks, but took a closer look and realized he was looking at human corpses. The bodies wore clothing that was characteristic of the time when the Dumoulins disappeared, offering newfound hope that their bodies had finally been found. By the time DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to the Dumoulins, only 2 of the children were still alive. The findings brought closure to their surviving kids and to the village, who spent the better part of a century wondering about the couple's fate. How do you think the couple ended up where they did? Do you know of any long unsolved disappearances? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more awesome content. Number 4. Submerged Settlement. While helping with a pipeline installation in Switzerland earlier this year, underwater archaeologists spotted piles of old mud-encrusted wood at the bottom of Lake Lucerne. Upon taking a closer look, they discovered pottery and stills that once held up houses. Samples from the sunken village were dated to around 1000 BC, confirming the city of Lucerne was settled around 2,000 years earlier than previously thought. Found at least 13 feet below the water's surface, the settlement adds a new chapter to Lucerne's mysterious history. Before the discovery, researchers were able to trace the city's past to around 800 years ago. They suspected that people lived in the area long before that, but lacked evidence of earlier beginnings. Lake Lucerne's water levels were much lower than they are now until the 15th century, when human activities and natural events caused the water level to rise. It's likely that the village sat alongside the lake before being consumed by it. Further investigation will hopefully add some insight into the everyday lives of Lucerne's earliest known settlers. Number 3. Headless Viking Pit. Back in 2009, archaeologists unearthed a burial pit filled with dozens of beheaded skeletons near the lakeside town of Weymouth on the English Channel coast. The massacred headless bodies all belonged to young men. They were buried naked and in a tangled mess, with their heads stacked neatly to the side. The skeletons bore telltale signs of violence, including deep cuts to the skull, jaw, and neck. It was clear, based on these injuries, that the group was taken captive and executed by a more powerful enemy, who repeatedly struck their victims' heads before hacking them off entirely. Other injuries, including sliced fingers, showed that the men had fought for their lives while they were being mercilessly slaughtered. They died sometime between 910 and 1030 AD, according to radiocarbon dating results. During that time period, the English and the Vikings were frequently at war. Researchers were initially unsure who the brutally decapitated men were. An analysis of 10 individuals' teeth revealed that they were from different parts of Scandinavia, confirming that they were Vikings. Most of them died in their early 20s. Experts identified Norway and Sweden as possible places of origin, and they think that one person may have come from north of the Arctic Circle. While the English often lost battles against the Vikings, the gory discovery shows that the intruding raiders were not always victorious. Number 2. Persian Cup in Siberia. While monitoring the melting permafrost above the Arctic Circle on Siberia's Guiden Peninsula in 2016, a team of scientists discovered a fragment of a medieval bronze cup that came from Persia, now known as Iran. Similar artifacts have been found in western Siberia before, but never this far north, according to researcher Andrei Gusev. Researchers believe that the cup was made sometime during the 10th or 11th century and was brought to Siberia around 200 years later. It was found roughly 2,300 miles from where it was manufactured, testifying to the vast trade networks that existed in a world that seemed much smaller without modern technology. Asian merchants appeared in modern-day Russia's Upper Kama region during the 6th and 7th centuries. They exchanged their goods for fur, walrus tusks, and hunting birds. In addition to the cup, the team unearthed a bronze knife handle and a ceramic pot. The indigenous Khanty and Mansi peoples placed high value on Persian imports. They assigned ritual meaning to the objects, keeping them in holy places and offering them as gifts to gods and spirits. They also used Persian dishes to serve ceremonial foods to the gods during festivals. It's entirely possible that more of these artifacts will appear as the permafrost continues to melt, reflecting one of the few upsides of the world's changing climate. Number 1. King Richard III's remains. King Richard III ruled England for just 2 years, from 1483 until his death in 1485. Throughout his short-lived reign, he managed to become one of the most controversial monarchs in British history. He took the crown by force by taking it from his nephews and having them executed. William Shakespeare famously depicted Richard III as a deformed hunchback, representing a physical manifestation of the king's depraved mind. Yikes. Richard III died in battle from 2 fatal blows to the back of the head. Legend holds that his body was dumped in the River Soar, but this was proven to be untrue in 2012, when archaeologists discovered the king's remains beneath a parking lot. Hardly a fitting place for a member of the monarchy. He was buried at the Greyfriars Priory in Leicester, and his grave had been forgotten about by the time the priory was shut down and demolished in 1538. A mitochondrial DNA analysis proved the remains did belong to Richard III, and an examination revealed that he was suffering from a roundworm infection when he died. He was given a proper funeral and reburied at Leicester Cathedral in 2015.
Number 10. An ancient murder. An ancient murder from over 4,000 years ago has finally been solved by archaeologists. The murder scene was first discovered in a Spanish cave. Researchers came across a group of skeletons from the late Neolithic period in 1999. The skeletons had clearly been murdered, then dumped deep inside the cave. 18 bodies were found here, along with 1,332 bone fragments. Using modern technology, scientists have finally come up with a cause of death. They know that there were two types of traumas exhibited by the skeletons: blunt force and sharp force. In other words, these people were brutally beaten and stabbed to death. Scientists have now identified the brutal murder weapon used in these killings. They believe the weapon was a large stone axe, likely sharpened to a point on one end so that it could be used for stabbing as well as beating. However, scientists are still looking for a motive for these barbarous killings. They blame interpersonal violence, but nobody knows what would have caused someone to go on a murder rampage with their trusty stone axe. Number 9. Bishop with a baby. Researchers at the Lund University Hospital in Sweden were shocked when they conducted a CT scan on a Scandinavian bishop from the year 1679 and discovered he had a tiny fetus tucked underneath his feet. Nobody knew just what to make of the bizarre discovery, as it's not every day that a mummified bishop's body would be found harboring a tiny, unborn child. But after years of mystery, researchers have finally made some progress. First, we need to know who this bishop was. His name was Peder Vinström, a prominent figure in Scandinavian history and one of the original fathers of Lund University. He was buried beneath a cathedral in Lund and became naturally mummified because of the plant material used to build his coffin. And because he had died over a long period of illness, by the time he was finally buried, he was practically a mummy anyway. But where did the fetus come from? It was obviously concealed beneath his feet on purpose. Researchers now know that there was a direct connection between the bishop and the child, and that the fetus may have been placed underneath his feet in secret by whoever organized his funeral. DNA evidence has shown that the fetus was probably the bishop's grandson. They share 25% of their DNA. It's likely that the child's mother, after having a stillbirth, secreted the fetus into the coffin with the bishop in hopes that the child would be close to its grandfather in death. Number 8. The mysterious unicorn. A new fossil discovery has shed some light on the mythical unicorn. While most of us believe white horses with horns growing out of their foreheads are just myths, the truth is that they may have actually been inspired by real unicorn creatures. This fossil was discovered in Kazakhstan, belonging to a prehistoric animal with a single horn that walked across our planet at the same time as humans. It dates back 29,000 years to before modern civilization, but to a time when human beings were still communicating with one another. Scientists have called it the Elasmotherium sibiricum, or the Siberian Unicorn for short. The creature is closely related to a rhinoceros, but its horn was significantly longer. Scientists say its horn could have been several feet long, and while it wasn't a magical white stallion that could shoot rainbows, it likely fascinated our ancient ancestors enough that they told stories about the Siberian unicorn. Those amazing stories have made it all the way to us in modern times. Number 7. King Arthur's Court. Camelot was the place where King Arthur held court at his round table. Most of us accept the stories of King Arthur as legends, but others have taken the tales a little more seriously. Experts have been wondering for decades just how real Camelot and King Arthur really were. Was he a real king? Did Camelot really exist? Depending on which expert you ask, the mystery has actually been solved already. The primary contender for the real-life location of Camelot is Caerleon in South Wales. Two experts of British history, Geoffrey of Monmouth and Cotin de Troyes, have Camelot placed at this very spot. Back in the 5th century, this was one of 3 Roman forts still standing in Britain. To understand the significance of this a bit better, keep in mind that the Welsh people of today are descendants of the Roman Britons who were pushed out of what is now England by the Anglo-Saxon invaders in the 5th century. The few descendants of the old Roman settlers were forced across the border, right to where Carlion is, and considering many historians believe King Arthur was a real leader of the Roman British people fighting against the invaders, it makes sense that he had used this place as his fortress. Through the years, Arthur and Camelot simply became more legendary than they really were. If Camelot truly did exist, it was almost certainly here at Carlion. Number 6. Mystery of the Hermit King. For the past few centuries, archaeologists haven't paid much attention to a particular bizarre cave dwelling in Britain. To be honest, they thought it was an ornamental building made as a joke back in the 18th century. It wasn't until just recently that the mystery of the cave dwelling was solved. As it turns out, the cave really was used as a house. In fact, it was built for a mysterious hermit king after he was exiled and forced to live alone in the wilderness. And it wasn't in the 18th century. It was 1200 years ago. The mystery actually has two parts. There's the cave, then there's the legend of King Eardwulf of Northumbria. Legend says that the king was chased away from his throne for mysterious reasons in 806 AD, then banished to live in a cave for the rest of his life. He died in 830 AD and was buried 5 miles from the cave. It wasn't until now that archaeologists connected the cave and the story of King Eardwulf. Edmund Simmons, an archaeologist from the Royal Agricultural University, believes the king lived out his final days in the cave under the ever-present eyes of his enemies. It wasn't as great as being a king, but at least he had his own house. Number 5. Fire and Brimstone. The ancient Middle Eastern city of Tal el-Hammam, as it's known today, was wiped out 3,600 years ago. Up until recently, nobody had really known what exactly happened to this ancient city. It looked as if it had been destroyed by a sudden earthquake or an exploding volcano, but there was just no way to tell what caused the abrupt deaths of everyone in the city, ruining the buildings and blanketing the town in fire. But now, the mystery has been solved. Experts in asteroid impacts stepped up to solve the case. They now believe that the ancient town was wiped out by a sudden asteroid strike, and that the event inspired the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The strike would have been similar to the one that killed the dinosaurs, just significantly smaller. The piece of spare rock probably exploded as a fireball 2.5 miles above the ancient city. Even though it didn't hit the city, the blast would have been 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped in Hiroshima. Everyone in the city was blinded immediately. The air temperature rose to 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit and the city was basically melted. At the same time, wind from the blast would have swept through the city streets of Jericho, 14 miles away. Experts believe that when the citizens of Jericho went to investigate the blast and found the entire city gone, as if snuffed out by a great god's fist, this is what inspired the story of the city of Sodom that eventually made its way into the Bible. Number 4. How the pyramids were built. Archaeologists believe they have finally solved the mystery of how the Great Pyramids of Egypt were built. The mystery was solved thanks to a simple discovery, a ramp from 4,500 years ago. According to the researchers with the French Institute for Oriental Archaeology, as well as experts with the University of Liverpool, the ramp was used to move huge blocks of alabaster. These alabaster blocks were cut from the slopes of a quarry, then moved using the ramps. It was actually quite simple. On each side of the ramp would be a flight of stairs where huge wooden posts were positioned. The ramp then acted like a sled with ropes fixed to the wooden posts. Workers could pull the blocks up or down the ramp using the wooden poles, ropes, and the power of gravity. With this simple method, they would have been able to easily move heavy stones up large inclines, hence getting giant pieces of rock to the top of the pyramids with relative ease. Number 3. The origin of the Sarsen stones. Speaking of huge rocks, researchers believe they've also solved the mystery of where the Stonehenge building materials came from. The actual megalithic stones used in the construction of this ancient sanctuary are called Sarsen stones. Archaeologists were able to pinpoint the source of these stones about 15 miles away from Stonehenge. They did it by analyzing the chemical composition of the stones, then comparing their findings to the chemical composition of a crop of similar stones. The huge pieces of material, some of which weigh over 20 tons and stand over 21 feet tall, came from an area known as Marlborough Downs. Discovering the origin of the stones has only solved one part of the larger mystery though. Researchers still don't know what Stonehenge was used for exactly, or how they carried the stones to the building site from 15 miles away. Maybe they used ramps similar to what the ancient Egyptians had, but that mystery is still being investigated. What do you think it was used for? Let us know in the comments below. Number 2. The Kennewick Man. The identity of the Kennewick Man has finally been solved. The mystery was ongoing for almost 2 decades, ever since a pair of youngsters stumbled upon a human skull inside the Columbian River in Kennewick, Washington. What first seemed to be the head of a murder victim turned into one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. Here's why the skull was such a mystery. It had very unusual characteristics, so unusual that nobody could figure out where the man came from or why he was there. Scientists were divided, some believing he came from Japan and others saying he was Polynesian. There were even some that claimed Europe as a point of origin, but the skull was found to be 9,500 years old, so none of these theories were readily accepted. But thanks to dedicated archaeologists like James Chatters, who was involved with the discovery, we now know exactly where the Kennewick Man came from. The experts used DNA sequencing to reveal that he was a Native American. This honestly makes the most sense, as anything else would have drastically changed what we know about North American history. However, researchers still don't know why he had such unusual features. They've actually managed to reconstruct his face based on his skull, and despite having Native American blood, he didn't look anything like a Native American. He must have seemed like an alien to his own people, born with totally different features than everyone else around him. Or maybe he was an alien. Number 1. The Antikythera Mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism has been a mystery to scientists ever since it was discovered at the bottom of the sea by sponge divers in the year 1901. The mechanism had been on a merchant ship that sank off the coast of Greece 2,000 years ago. When the sponge divers found the ship, they looted as much treasure from it as possible. The most bizarre relic was the Antikythera mechanism, which has gained significant fame in modern times because it looks like it came from an ancient computer. People have speculated that this rusty green piece of metal was once part of a larger, more complex computer developed by either incredibly intelligent ancient people or aliens. But the mystery of the mechanism has finally been solved. Because so much of the mechanism was missing, it was a lot of work piecing it back together again to recreate what it used to look like. But engineering experts from University College London have now built a working replica of the actual machine that the mechanism broke apart from. According to Adam Wojcik, one of the scientists working on the project, the mechanism was just a simple calendar. Well, maybe not that simple. The mechanism tracked the movements of the sun, moon, and 5 planets. However, the mechanism's designers assumed that these objects revolve around the Earth, so their movements are far from correct. Basically, the mechanism was just a fancy astrological calendar, similar to a modern watch. Are there any ancient mysteries you're still waiting for scientists to solve?
Number 10. The Bridgewater Triangle. The Bridgewater Triangle is a smaller, lesser-known version of the Bermuda Triangle. It's a section of land about 200 square miles inside southeastern Massachusetts. It's a triangle between the towns of Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown. All kinds of wild and unbelievable things are said to occur inside the Bridgewater Triangle. The area is basically a paranormal vortex with everything from alien sightings to poltergeists, great balls of fire flying through the sky, and even Bigfoot-type creatures lurking in the wilderness. Oh yeah, and there have been Thunderbird sightings here too, with people claiming to spot flying creatures that look like pterodactyls soaring across the sky. Even the Norton Police Sergeant, Thomas Downey, witnessed these incredible mythical birds in the sky. To be honest, there are so many supernatural occurrences here that it's hard to believe more people don't know about it. Not far off Route 24, creepy and horrific mutations and alleged animal sacrifice were discovered in the Freetown Fall River State Forest. For many years, it's been believed to be the site of strange rituals, not just animal sacrifices, but also human murders that were possibly committed by satanic cults. Sadly, the forest is also the site of many suicides, which adds even more to the sinister atmosphere. People claim to see the ghosts sitting on rocks, and sometimes even dancing. There are legends of Native American curses, and some even say there's a swamp monster called the Pukwudgie. Nobody knows why this particular part of Massachusetts is so creepy, but if the locals are to be believed, the entire area is a hotbed for the supernatural. Number 9. Hegra is a mysterious ancient city located in the desert north of Saudi Arabia that has gone untouched for thousands of years. Giant boulders the size of buildings and rocky outcrops beautifully carved and with classical style columns poke out of the sands like lovely scattered seeds. Hegra was once a major international trading hub, but it was abandoned 2,000 years ago and hasn't really gotten much attention since. It looks so similar to the more famous destination of Petra in neighboring Jordan that you might not even be able to tell them apart. But this shouldn't be a huge surprise. After all, the two sites are only a couple of 100 miles apart. They were also built by the same people. It was the Nabatean kingdom who constructed both Petra and Hegra before they vanished from the pages of history forever. The Nabateans are one of the most intriguing civilizations that most people have never even heard of. They were master merchants who dwelled in the desert and controlled all the trade moving through Arabia, interacting with the kingdoms of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Syria, along with all the other major players in the Mediterranean. They were the #1 suppliers of frankincense and myrrh, which was highly prized throughout the world for religious ceremonies. However, they were destroyed in the 1st century AD by the expanding Roman Empire. Eventually, over a period of just a few hundred years, the Nabateans went extinct and their ancient desert cities, like Hegra and Petra, were abandoned. Number 8. Haunted Hawaii. Hawaii is not just a gorgeous island paradise, it's also a little bit haunted. Two of the most haunted places in all of Hawaii are located around the area of East Oahu, and it's very likely you have never heard of them before. One of these haunted venues is a bridge, while the other is a popular mall. According to Oahu locals, it's the 16th Avenue Bridge that's haunted. The haunting started after a little girl was killed in a hit-and-run incident. Now people who walk near the bridge in the early hours of the evening claim to witness a little girl reaching for their hand, trying to make it safely across the bridge. But by the time they realize what they're looking at, the little girl's haunting apparition is gone. The second haunted place is at a mall in Kahala, where visitors sometimes witness a ghost with no face loitering in department stores and even bathrooms. Employees at the mall have reported that the ghost asked them for help, but when they turn to answer, she has no face, and then she's gone. And so you see, Hawaii is more than beaches and sunshine. It's also full of ghosts and horrors. Did you ever think such a wonderful place could have such terrifying features? Next time you visit this tropical paradise, are you going to check out these places? Let us know in the comment section below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 7. The Egyptian Black Desert. The Egyptian Black Desert is one of the strangest and most unexpected places in the world. To be quite honest, it almost looks like the surface of Mars. The desert here is an expansive landscape of black sandy plains, black mountains of dust, and strange black rock formations. And while the desert isn't home to any mummies that we know of, it does have a deeper history, geologically speaking. It goes back 180 million years to the Jurassic period, when the desert was beneath the sea. But when intense volcanic activity started changing the Earth, this land rose as a type of volcanic crater covered in veined marble. It was the volcanic activity that turned the landscape black. But other than rocks and sand, there are some unique things to be found here. The remains of one of the largest dinosaurs in the world was found in the Black Desert 20 years ago, called the Paralitanstromery. This incredible beast was upwards of 59 tons and roughly 85 feet in length. There could be other titanic dinosaurs hidden here under the black sand, but nobody has really done much to look for them in recent years. Number 6. Las Posas. Another one of the weirdest places that you most likely never even heard of is called Las Posas, located in the thick Mexican jungle. It's a surrealist garden that was dreamt up by Edward James, an eccentric collector of art from the 20th century. When he arrived in Xilitla, Mexico, near the end of the 1940s, he was captivated by the amazing, lush, and beautiful landscape and decided to build his home there. He also went on to create a unique sculptural heaven in the jungle that some have compared to the crazy surrealism of Salvador Dali's artwork. Columns that look like giant flowers, dramatic gates, Gothic arches, pavilions with multiple levels, and lovely spiral staircases to nowhere float in mid-air as if they were an invitation to the horizon. Today, the sculpture garden remains standing in the jungle, seemingly defying all architectural labels. It's a strange glimpse of both fantasy and reality, a place you might accidentally mistake for the Garden of Eden. It's definitely not somewhere you want to miss on your next trip to Mexico. Number 5. Shahi Kila. The Shahi Kila was once a majestic palace in India, located near the Tapti River in Burhanpur. Almost nothing remains today, except for the palace's crumbling ruins. Locals call it a labyrinth because the architecture is so strange. It was originally built by the Faruqi rulers, who dominated land from 1382 until the Mughal Empire assimilated them in 1601. The main attraction of Shahi Kila is the royal bath, which miraculously is still almost entirely intact. It's said that the emperor's wife took luxurious baths here in water scented with saffron and rose petals. The ceiling has ancient paintings on it, with one of the paintings supposedly being the inspiration for the Taj Mahal. In fact, the Taj Mahal was supposedly built in Burhanpur, but it never happened. The chosen site is still a vacant plot of land beside the river, not far from the ruined palace of Shahi Kila. Number 4. Bet Gurvin Maresha. Bet Gurvin Maresha is a mysterious archaeological park that encompasses 3 ancient sites, that of Maresha, Bet Gurvin, and a mysterious fortress used by the Crusaders. The region was first settled during the Iron Age, but later emerged as a major city. Alexander the Great conquered Maresha, which was then colonized by Greek soldiers and left under Hellenistic rule. In the year 40 BC, the Parthians showed up and destroyed the city of Maresha, which ultimately led to the establishment of Bet Gurvin as the main Jewish town in the area. When there was a Jewish revolt against the Roman rule in AD 66, and the inhabitants of Bet Gurvin were slaughtered one by one. Still, the city bounced back, reestablishing itself and growing until the 7th century when the Muslim forces showed up and took the city over. But it was soon annexed to the Kingdom of Jerusalem. A Crusader castle was built in the year 1134, and soon after, when the area fell under Muslim control again, the castle, the city, and everything else was burned to the ground. As you can tell, this place has quite a bit of history, but surprisingly, there's actually a lot of the old structures left. Archaeologists have even discovered a labyrinth of subterranean caves covering an area of 741 acres. Many of these caves date back to the original settlements at Maresha, with at least 3,500 rooms, tombs, and chambers hidden underground. Number 3. Sgibi. Sgibi is an old Roman fortress that you had no idea even existed. It's located in Anglesey, Wales. You see, before the Romans made it all the way to Wales and conquered it, Anglesey was a sacred site for the Druids, who held important religious ceremonies here. As the Roman forces were displacing people by the thousands in the United Kingdom, many of them ran away to Anglesey. By the time the Romans finally got to this place, it was full of mystical Druids and escaping migrants from all over the island. Some historians believe that the Romans went all the way to Anglesey simply to eradicate the Druids, while others say they went to pillage the copper mines. Whatever the case, they established a large fort in the year 77 AD. It was huge, able to hold 1,000 auxiliary infantrymen. Nobody knows exactly what went on in the years after the fortress was built, other than that the Romans plowed through Wales and took whatever they wanted. Then, by the year 393 AD, the fort was abandoned and the Romans had all but left. What do you think really happened here? Number 2. Recopolis. The Recopolis is located near the small Spanish village of Zorita de los Danes in Guadalajara. It's one of the only archaeological sites in the entire world that has ruins left over by the legendary Visigoths, the defeaters of the Roman Empire in 378 AD. The city of Recopolis was built in the year 578 by the most important Visigoth monarch in their history, King Louis-Vigild. The Visigoth kingdom at the time went all the way from the edge of southern France to the Iberian Peninsula. The city of Archaeological was to be made from scratch, a completely new city that would be the center of the new Visigoth Empire. It was complete with palaces, workshops, artisan stores, an impressive aqueduct system, and defensive walls, the works. But archaeologists don't know everything about the city. The problem is that in the year 711, Muslim forces invaded Archaeological and defeated the Visigoths. They then dismantled the great city and used the stones to build their own city a few miles up the road. Number 1. The Lost City of Tamau. Nobody really knows where the Lost City of Tamau actually is. What we do know is that over 500 years ago, it became the first European settlement in Chinese history. The city goes back to a man named Jorge Alvarez, who happened to be immortalized in a life-size statue in the city of Macau, known as the Vegas of Asia. This guy is extremely mysterious, as is his fabled city. Based on what we know from historical documents, Jorge marked the first European settlement in China with a padbrau tree in the year 1513. He planted this tree somewhere between Hong Kong and what is today Macau. But historians from all over the world have never actually been able to find the exact location of the marker. Some believe the original city was Chuanmun, while some say it's located in the far west of Hong Kong. One theory is that the tree was planted on land that is now occupied by one of the busiest places in the world, the Hong Kong International Airport. But regardless of where the city of Tamau stood 500 years ago, it's gone now. It was once a bustling city where East met West, allowing for seamless trade in a multicultural environment. Today, it's likely a ruin underneath an airport. Which of these mysterious places would you love to visit? Number 8. The Valley of the Golden Mummies. 380 kilometers west of the Great Pyramid of Giza, archaeologists discovered a large cache of Greco-Roman sarcophagi, covered in so much gold that they nicknamed the area the Valley of the Golden Mummies. Each of the mummies were covered in lavish artwork, making them some of the most beautiful and well-preserved mummies ever found. From the moment they were opened, sunlight reflected off the brilliant gold sarcophagi, giving archaeologists a glimpse at the stunning discovery they had made. As researchers continued to excavate, they found over 200 mummies. Because of the size of the site, one that measured 6 kilometers squared by 2.3 meters squared in size, some experts believe there could be between 5,000 to 10,000 more mummies hidden underground, just waiting to be discovered. One of the most remarkable things about the mummies is that each one looks different from the next. Some are decorated with painted scenes on a plain exterior. Others are covered in gold with elaborate masks. Even the tombs in which they were found were different from one another. One of the tombs had an entrance hall, a delivery room, and a simple burial chamber. A second, larger tomb was a single room filled with mummies. Another was located beneath a large shaft in the ground with small cubbyholes cut into the walls to display priceless artifacts. The ways the mummies were displayed were also unique to one another. Almost 60 were found with gilded masks covered in gold over their faces, and a golden waistcoat decorated with scenes of gods and goddesses. Another style of mummy was covered with cartonnage, decorative material made from layers of plaster, linen, and glue, used to decorate the casings of mummies. Elaborate scenes of Egyptian gods were painted on the material that depicted Anubis, the god of mummification. Other scenes showed the judgment of the dead, where the Egyptian god Osiris watches as the god Anubis weighs the heart of the deceased. A third mummy was very different from the others and placed inside a human-shaped pottery coffin. A fourth mummy was done in the classic style, similar to ones found in the New Kingdom, and was covered entirely in linen. If the stunning artwork wasn't enough, archaeologists were excited to find detailed portraits painted on some of the golden masks, the kind that only the wealthiest Egyptian families could afford. The discovery of various artifacts, including statues, earrings, and amulets made from precious gemstones and various types of pottery, are evidence that those buried in the Valley of the Golden Mummies were higher-class Egyptians. Number 7. Temple of Bastet. Near the port city of Alexandria, archaeologists discovered a 2,200-year-old temple dedicated to Egyptian cat goddess Bastet, and it could be the first Ptolemaic-era temple dedicated to the cat goddess in Alexandria. Even more remarkable is that it could be the first trace of Alexandria's royal quarter ever found. Within the ruins, there was a large number of statues depicting Bastet, indicating that worship of the ancient deity lasted well into the Ptolemaic period, which was heavily influenced by the Greeks. Bastet was also considered a fertility goddess and seen as a protector, which is clearly represented in her depictions as a fierce lion. When the temple was erected, it was surrounded by two channels lined with trees overlooking the city. At one point during the 22nd dynasty, the temple was extended into something even more elaborate, with an ornamental gate and lavish courtyard added to the structure for religious festivals. Worship of Bastet came in many forms, with Egyptians often mummifying cats and placing them in large cemeteries to honor the deity. Offerings of thousands of bronze statuettes of the goddess were often left at cemeteries, and small figures of cats were made into amulets and worn to show one's devotion to the ferocious deity. Number 6. Golden tongued mummies. In Saqqara, about 20 miles south of Cairo, a number of golden amulets shaped like tongues were found inside an ancient tomb. Archaeologists knew they had found something remarkable. The discovery was made in an ancient rock-cut tomb in northern Egypt. 16 2,000-year-old mummies were uncovered, and although they weren't very well preserved, the small gold foil tongue-shaped amulets were remarkably intact. Experts believe the amulets were placed there so the deceased could speak before the court of the god of Osiris in the afterlife. Ancient Egyptians believed Osiris was the lord of the underworld and judge of the dead. A second mummy was just as elaborately decorated as the first, with gold-covered decorations in the shape of a crown that was emblazoned with a cobra. The mummy also had a necklace with the head of a falcon, which is the symbol of the god Horus, who symbolized protection, health, and restoration. The discovery was made at a site known as the Taposiris Magna Temple in Alexandria. On an earlier archaeological mission, the Director General of Antiquities Authority announced the discovery of a funeral mask of a woman that also had golden flakes, as well as 8 marble masks that dated back to Greek and Roman eras. Within the same tomb, a number of rare coins were also discovered, with images of Cleopatra. The coffins are just one of the countless archaeological discoveries made there. Not far from the location of the burial shaft, there is a 4,700-year-old stepped pyramid. It's 200 years older than the infamous pyramids at Giza. At the time the mummies were buried there, Saqqara was considered a site of pilgrimage, similar to ancient Mecca, that attracted not just Egyptians, but people from all over the eastern Mediterranean. To be buried there, one would have to be quite prestigious. Number 5. The largest tomb in the Valley of the Kings. With so many discoveries made in Egypt, there is one that stands above them all. KV5, the largest tomb ever found, rivaled the treasures of Tutankhamun. Located in the Valley of the Kings, the coffins of at least 52 sons of Ramesses II were found inside a tomb. Many archaeologists tried to locate the tomb before, even Howard Carter himself, who became famous for discovering the tomb of King Tut. But KV5 would remain hidden until 1985, when a team from the University of Cairo, along with the Theban Mapping Project, used ground-penetrating radar to locate the long-lost tomb. They were shocked when they realized the tomb was only 230 feet from the tomb of Tutankhamun. The tomb was stunning. It was found at the end of a long passageway, flanked by 20 chambers and a statue of the god of the underworld, Osiris. Another 20 chambers were found past the first set, with sloping corridors leading to more rooms on a lower level of the crypt. Sadly, the tomb was steeped in heartache, with the pharaoh visiting it each time for the same reason, to bury one of his sons. Even though flash floods, thunderstorms, and looting threatened the location over time, it remained mostly intact. But the mummies didn't fare so well. Most of the remains were not preserved well, with the bones and body parts found in fragments or wrapped in linen. But there were treasures to be found. Grave goods, including canopic jars, which were used to store the preserved organs of the deceased, were found alongside limestone statues, clay and stone beads, amulets, and other grave goods. The walls of the tombs displayed detailed reliefs painted in blue, red, and white. As one of the greatest pharaohs of the 19th dynasty, the tomb was built to honor Ramesses II. But it will take much more time to uncover all the treasures left behind. After 10 years of excavation, experts have uncovered about 130 chambers, but they estimate they have only found about 7% of the secrets buried in K5V. What other treasures do you think archaeologists will find here? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 4. Lost Golden City. In ancient Egypt, sarcophagi weren't the only things made from gold. Archaeologists conducting a dig 500 kilometers south of Cairo, near Luxor, discovered a 3,000-year-old city that had been lost to the sands of time. It was known as Aten and was established in the 18th dynasty. The largest ancient city ever uncovered in Egypt, it is considered one of the most important archaeological finds since the discovery of King Tutankhamun's tomb. After only a few weeks of excavation, archaeologists were able to pinpoint it to the reign of Amenhotep III, who ruled Egypt from 1391 to 1353 BC, and was one of Egypt's most powerful pharaohs. At first, archaeologists only spotted a few mud bricks, but as they continued to dig, the walls of the ancient city spread out before them. Eventually, several neighborhoods were uncovered, including a bakery and a residential area that was filled with tools of daily life from ancient Egyptians. A number of very exciting discoveries were made in the city, including jewelry and colored pottery. Excavations also unearthed scarab beetle amulets and mud bricks that had the seal of Amenhotep III on them. Scarabs and amulets were often used for decorative purposes, but also as ritual items, and they were an important part of Egypt's ancient heritage. They were also used as a display of great wealth, offering archaeologists a glimpse into the lives of the most prestigious ancient Egyptians. After months of excavations, antiquities experts vowed to continue their work in an effort to uncover more treasures that are untouched. Number 3. Kufu Ship. Even with so many remarkable discoveries made in Egypt, experts believe there are still countless hidden treasures left to be found. Sometimes these discoveries are located in previously undiscovered crypts, but other times they are also found near important historical sites. In 1954, an archaeologist discovered a massive ship buried next to the Great Pyramid of Khufu. After years of excavation, experts reassembled the extraordinary ship. One of the oldest planked vessels ever found, the royal craft is believed to be about 4,600 years old. It was buried in the 26th century BC in a carved stone pit and was used to carry the pharaoh Khufu on important voyages. For thousands of years, it sat undisturbed until archaeologists discovered the beautiful ship buried in a limestone sarcophagus. But uncovering the ancient ship wasn't easy. As archaeologists dug under a stone wall near the south side of the Great Pyramid, they discovered a layer of earth mixed with wood chips, charcoal, and powdered limestone. As they continued to dig, they revealed 40 limestone blocks lined up side by side in a rectangular pit. Only after carefully hauling away the stone slabs did they discover the ship's wooden planks and oars, draped with ropes. It took 20 months to uncover the astonishing 144-foot-long vessel, but the only way to remove it was to disassemble the ship. When it was time to put the ship back together, experts had to put 1,200 separate pieces back together, including 30 planks made from logs as long as 76 feet. A stunning 95% of the original parts were saved. For decades, the ship was on display at the Giza Solar Boat Museum, but in the summer of 2021, it was moved in an elaborate ceremony to the new Grand Egyptian Museum in Giza. One of the most fascinating things about the boat is that it was made without any nails. The pharaoh's workers would have had to saw raw logs by hand and turn them with hand tools, fitting them together like puzzle pieces. Even with the remarkable discovery, scholars still continue to debate the purpose of the ship. Some think it was used by Khufu in daily voyages across the sky as his persona, the sun god Ra. But others think it could be a funerary craft to transport his body on the Nile to the Giza necropolis. Either way, this stunning creation is an important discovery, offering a glimpse into the ancient Egyptian shipbuilding and the life of one of ancient Egypt's most well-known pharaohs. Number 2. The Silver Sarcophagus. A rare silver sarcophagus found at the start of World War II went unexamined for decades. The tomb of Susanes I was originally discovered in the 19th century by French Egyptologist Pierre Montet at the same time World War II was raging on the other side of the world. Sadly, as war broke out, Montet retreated to Europe, leaving the tomb unopened where he found it. When the tomb was finally opened decades later, researchers were in for a shock when they realized the pharaoh was found within a solid silver container embellished with gold. In ancient Egypt, silver was rarer than gold and had to be imported from abroad. While gold symbolized the flesh of the gods, silver was thought to be their bones. Susanes was an obscure ruler who governed Egypt more than 3,000 years before his tomb was located. At the time, the Egyptian kingdom was divided between rival rulers of the north and south. The elaborate silver coffin, along with the metal objects found in the tomb, are evidence that Susanes didn't mind spending money to have craftsmen make these luxurious items. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs believed they would receive the gift of eternal life if they were in the proximity of gold. This is why funerary masks, sarcophagi, and even ancient objects are often covered in gold leaf or gold paint, in a process known as gilding. Why do you think Susanes decided to have a sarcophagus made from silver instead of gold? Sadly, even though the silver coffin survived centuries, the mummy of Susanes did not. Inside, only a pile of bones, black dust, and a few funerary items were found. Still, this elaborate sarcophagus survived long enough to dazzle archaeologists and show the wealth and power of this ancient pharaoh. Number 1. 100 ancient coffins. Archaeologists made the remarkable discovery of 100 ancient coffins, along with 40 gilded statues and various artifacts in a vast burial ground south of Cairo. The 2,500-year-old coffins were very well preserved, with most covered in vibrant painted scenes and decorated with gold. Researchers determined the coffins belonged to a wealthy group of Egyptians. When researchers made their announcement, they opened one of the coffins and x-rayed the mummy inside to determine the gender. They found the individual was a male, in good health. They also determined the items date back to the Ptolemaic dynasty that ruled Egypt for 300 years. The discovery was just one of many at the Saqqara site in recent years. Another excavation revealed 140 sealed sarcophagi and other shafts filled with painted, gold-covered coffins. As part of Egypt's ancient capital of Memphis, where the Giza pyramids also stand, Saqqara is becoming a hotbed for ancient antiquities and artifacts that show off the true power of ancient Egypt.
Number 10. North Carolina Shipwreck. The SS North Carolina was a steamship that sank off the South Carolina coast over 180 years ago, in the summer of 1840, after it collided with its sister ship, the Governor Dudley. Thankfully, everyone on board survived, but the ship's cargo, including a trove of rare gold coins, were lost. The currency alone is estimated to be worth tens of millions of dollars in today's money. The hoard is thought to include coins from the U.S. Mint in Dahlonega, Georgia, which opened just 2 years before the wreck, according to a statement from Blue Water Ventures International and Endurance Exploration Group, who are working together to recover the artifacts. Divers commissioned by the companies found some gold coins, marble objects, dinnerware, and brass spikes that were used to build the ship. This wasn't the first time someone tried to salvage the North Carolina's treasure, but doing so is easier said than done, with low visibility in the murky water and the tendency for sharks to congregate in the area. On top of that, many of the treasures are buried beneath at least 3 feet of sand. and digging them up would require expensive machinery. Nevertheless, people continue to try in hopes of getting their hands on some of the gold coins or luxury jewelry left behind by passengers. Number 9. Roman-era hoard. During a recent family vacation to the Spanish coastal town of Shabia, brothers-in-law Luis Lenspardo and Cesar Jimeno Alcala decided to go snorkeling. Their original goal was to clean up trash, but plans changed when one of the men noticed something glimmering on the Mediterranean seafloor. He went to investigate and discovered that it was a shiny coin. After dusting it off, he saw that it featured an ancient Greek or Roman-like face. The coin was in a small hole, and the pair suspected that there were more where it came from. They returned with a Swiss Army knife and found 7 more coins. Lenspardo and Jimeno Alcala reported the discovery to local authorities, who dispatched a team of archaeologists to the site. They found 53 gold coins dating between 364 and 408 AD, when the Western Roman Empire was in decline. The coins are extremely well preserved, bearing identifiable images of the Roman emperors Valentinian I, Valentinian II, Theodosius I, Arcadius, and Honorius. There's only one coin with an unidentifiable portrait. It's one of the largest Roman coin hoards ever found in Europe, and it's especially valuable because it can help to shed light on the circumstances surrounding the empire's final days. Researcher Jaime Molina Vidal told Live Science that the discovery reflects the type of fear someone might have when burying their treasure hoard to hide it from invaders. No nearby shipwrecks have been found, further pointing toward the possibility that someone went out of their way to conceal their hoard. Number 8. Battersea Shield. While excavating at the Thames River in London, ahead of the construction of the Chelsea Bridge in 1857, workers dredged up an ancient bronze shield. It consists of several different pieces being held together by rivets and is decorated in the style of the Celtic Latin culture. Back when it was being used, it would have functioned as a covering for a wooden shield. Known as the Battersea Shield, it's widely considered one of the most significant pieces of Celtic art ever found in Britain. But its origins are largely a mystery. For one, nobody can say with certainty when the shield was made or used. The Museum of London, which houses the artifact, dated it to sometime between 350 and 50 BC. But some experts have speculated that it may have been made during the early 1st century AD. The workers who discovered the Battersea Shield also found skeletons and large amounts of Roman and Celtic weapons. This led some historians to conclude that the shield was left behind during Julius Caesar's invasion of Britain in 54 BC. But most modern scholars challenge this view. The bronze plating that the shield is made with is too thin to have protected someone during combat, and it bears no signs of battle-related damage, so it's likely that the Battersea Shield was made as a status symbol or a parade piece and deposited into the river as a religious offering. Number 7. Head of Hadrian. The Roman Emperor Hadrian is perhaps best known for building an 80-mile-long wall across Britain to separate the so-called barbarians from the Romans. Over 2 centuries ago, a bronze head depicting Hadrian was pulled from the River Thames in the heart of Roman Britain, which is now London. It was likely once attached to a full-body statue of the emperor that probably stood in a public forum. The statue would have been 1 1/4 times life-size, according to the British Museum. Hadrian was known for traveling extensively throughout Europe. It was common for cities to rebuild and beautify as a result of these imperial visits, so it makes sense that people would erect a statue to commemorate the ruler. There are plenty of surviving marble sculptures of Hadrian, but there aren't many bronze examples, making the head of Hadrian both rare and mysterious. Number 6. River Ware Hoard. A pair of British divers named Gary and Trevor Bankhead have made hundreds of dives at historical sites around the world. While working under a contract with the British government in 2007, they uncovered a trove of gold and silver treasures from the River Wear outside Durham Castle. The 32 objects, which were once owned by the Queen, the Pope, and other leaders, included goblets, medals, crucifixes, and more. They date back to different periods, including the medieval, Saxon, and Roman eras. The Bankhead brothers also found a solid gold Japanese coin, marking the 60th renovation of the Grand Shrine of Ise, the country's most important Shinto temple. But what was it doing in England? Well, the explanation is surprisingly simple. The 24-carat piece belonged to Archbishop of Canterbury Michael Ramsay, who received it during a 1973 trip to Japan. While visiting, he met Nikkyo Niwano, the president of the country's Buddhist movement. The coin is worth around $16,500 in today's money. Altogether, the divers uncovered hundreds of treasures known as the River Wear Hoard. At least 30 belonged to Ramsay. In addition to the Japanese coin, Ramsay's items included a silver trowel from India, an 18-karat gold medallion, and a 19th century Russian icon. Among the other objects, there was a brothel token featuring a woman's legs. It was the first of its kind ever found in the UK. The collection also included a 13th century seal and a brooch depicting Queen Elizabeth and Sir Walter Raleigh, a historically famous statesman and explorer. Nobody knows how Ramsay's belongings ended up in the river. One theory holds that he threw them in there as a gift to the locals sometime after his retirement to Durham in 1974 and before his death in 1988. Number 5. Long-lost beer ingredients. Treasure comes in many forms, depending on what's important to the person looking for it. For amateur diver and explorer Steve Hickman, that treasure was beer. Back in the 1980s, he encountered a sunken ship called the Wallachia off the Scottish coast. The Wallachia sank on a foggy day in 1895 after colliding with another vessel. It had just left Glasgow and was laden with cargo, including thousands of bottles of different kinds of alcoholic beverages. The cold water that the ship sank in helped to preserve the booze while it sat for over 100 years on the seafloor. After stumbling upon the wreck, Hickman began diving down there periodically to retrieve whiskey, gin, and beer. Over the years, he collected dozens of bottles. Earlier this year, a team accompanied Hickman on one of his dives down to the Wallachia. They handed their bottles from the trip over to scientists at Brewlab, a research firm that specializes in beer quality. The experts found live yeast in 3 bottles of beer, and they tried to recreate the original beer with it. In the process, they discovered that the beer contained a long-lost strain of yeast that is no longer used today. They're currently looking into whether it could be useful for, or perhaps even improve, modern brewing. Number 4. HMS Pandora wreck. The British Royal Navy ship HMS Pandora was launched in 1779. It became famous for hunting down and capturing 14 mutineers in the South Pacific, who had seized control of another British Royal Navy vessel, the HMS Bounty. Shortly into the return voyage to Europe in 1791, the Pandora ran aground on the outer Great Barrier Reef. It sank the next morning, killing 31 crew members and 4 of the mutineers. Colonial authorities in New South Wales, Australia, didn't bother trying to salvage the wreck. A trio of explorers discovered the sunken ship in 1977, and it quickly became known as one of the most significant shipwrecks in the Southern Hemisphere. The Queensland Museum carried out several excavations of the Pandora between 1983 and 1999. The team found skeletal remains of crew members, fancy shoe buckles, buttons, wax seals, and a one-of-a-kind 18th century stamp belonging to the ship's first lieutenant, John Larkin. They managed to dig up a portion of the wreck, but much of the vessel remains buried in what marine archaeologist Peter Gesner described as a marine Pompeii. Raising the Pandora would be a time-consuming and costly endeavor. The price of recovering the copper-sheathed hull alone was estimated at around $60 million in 1998, and it would undoubtedly cost a lot more now. So it's unlikely that the wreck will ever be brought to the surface, and it's unknown whether there are plans to continue excavating. Number 3. Ancient fruit. Long ago, before Alexander the Great founded Alexandria in 331 AD, the city of Thonis Heracleion was Egypt's largest port city, but a combination of earthquakes, tsunamis, and rising sea levels weakened the ancient metropolis. At the end of the 2nd century, the ground beneath Thonis Heracleion liquefied, plunging it into the sea. Marine archaeologists have been exploring the submerged site for years, and they continue to make new discoveries. They recently discovered an array of artifacts, including Greek pottery and 2,400-year-old wicker baskets filled with fruit. Near the city's entrance, the team found a Greek funerary area known as a tumulus. A lot of the site was burned, indicating that special ceremonies took place there. Archaeologist Frank Gaudio told CNN that the most recent evidence near the tumulus dated back to the 4th century BC, even though Thonis Heracleion continued to thrive for hundreds of years after that. This is where the archaeologists found the wicker baskets, which they believe may have been left as an offering in what was once an underground room. This would help to explain the content, which include grape seeds and dome fruit from the African palm tree. These are just some of the discoveries that have been made at Thonis Heracleion, and we're chipping away at the mysteries surrounding this ancient underwater city. Number 2. Thai bullet coins. Before Thailand got its current name in 1939, it was known as Siam. Historically, Siam and the kingdoms before it used a type of currency called Phat Duang, also known as bullet money or bullet coins. They were mostly made from bars of silver bent into a round shape and stamped with marks, and were issued according to the baht system of weights, which is also what modern Thai currency is based on. Bullet coins were first commonly used sometime between the 13th and 15th century during the Sukhothai kingdom. They remained in use during the subsequent Ayutthaya, Thonburi, and Ratanakosin kingdoms. The currency was discontinued in 1904 in favor of flat coinage. Modern divers, nicknamed Indiana Jones, scour Thailand's riverbeds for ancient treasures. Copper points can reap as much as $15 each, which is twice the country's average daily wage. But bullet coins are known to fetch an even prettier penny, selling for as much as $300 each. Most people outside of Thailand wouldn't recognize a bullet coin unless they knew what they were looking for, since they don't resemble the coins that we're used to using. So to anyone with an untrained eye, these artifacts would be very mysterious to come across. Number 1. Ancient Sword. While vacationing with her family at Sweden's Vidastern Lake in 2018, 8-year-old Saga Vanasek felt something strange while looking for rocks to skip in the water. She pulled it out of the lake and noticed that it had a point on one hand and a handle on the other. Saga yelled over to her father, saying that she had found a sword. At first, Saga's father, Andy, thought she had uncovered an odd-looking stick or a branch. He asked the neighbor to take a look at the object, and they told him that it looked like a Viking sword. Andy reported the discovery to archaeologists, who initially estimated that the sword was at least 1,000 years old. Imagine the little girl's excitement when she heard that. They now believe that it may date as far back as 1,500 years, before the Vikings were around. Experts were impressed by Saga's find and reportedly said that nothing quite like it had ever been found in Scandinavia. Water levels were unusually low when Saga went scavenging for rocks, and this could explain how she stumbled upon the sword. Archaeologists carried out further excavations at the site and found a brooch dating back to the 3rd century, as well as an 18th century coin. They announced that they planned to continue exploring the lake for ancient treasures. The sword was turned over to the local museum so that it can go on display and be enjoyed by the public.
Number 8. The Siberian Unicorn. It's true, unicorns did exist, and they lived at the same time as modern humans. They didn't necessarily look the way you might think they do, but have a modern cousin that you might have seen at your local zoo. An ancient rhino species named Elasmotherium sibericum was just one of 250 rhino species during prehistoric times. It weighed up to 3.5 tons, over 7,700 pounds, about the size of a mammoth, and once lived in the open grasslands of what is now Kazakhstan. These so-called Siberian unicorns, who got their name for the single horn they once had, were around at the same time as modern humans and Neanderthals. Even though experts have never found one of their famed horns, Elasmotherium sibericum had a single horn that protruded from its skull, the largest horn of any rhinoceros species. Just like the mammoth, they also had long, shaggy hair and died exclusively on tough, dry grasses. It's believed this particular diet could have been the reason behind their downfall. Until a new study was done on a skull found in Kazakhstan, experts thought Elasmotherium sibericum died out between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago. But new research showed they were around much longer, as close as 39,000 years ago, which would have had them roaming the plains at the same time Neanderthals were hunting and gathering. But that doesn't mean the Siberian unicorn was food for modern humans. As researchers studied the teeth of these massive animals, they found isotopes that helped them pinpoint the animal's downfall because they relied exclusively upon the grasslands for their survival. They didn't stand a chance when the world's ice sheets spread, covering their feeding habitat. Unlike other species like the woolly rhino, who ate different varieties of food, the Siberian unicorn eventually went extinct. Even though they were the last surviving member of the Elastotherium genus, they lasted much longer than scientists first thought. Number 7. Caelestventus hanseni. How did an extremely rare flying dinosaur end up in the deserts of prehistoric Utah? That's the question archaeologists had to answer when the remains of Caelestventus hanseni were found near Dinosaur National Monument. The animal was located in the Saints and Sinner Quarry, a truly rare find considering how all the other Triassic pterosaurs have only been found in the Italian, Austrian, and Swiss Alps. With a wingspan of over 5 feet, Caelestventus hanseni was quite large when compared to other flying reptiles that soared on skin-covered wings. The largest animal ever to fly, they thrived from the late Triassic epoch, which started around 215 million years ago and lasted until the end of the Cretaceous period, around 66 million years ago. When researchers found the bones, they were excited that they had stumbled across the only desert-dwelling non-pterodactyloid pterosaur, one that predated other desert pterosaurs by more than 65 million years. Lucky for them, the bones had settled in an area rich in sandstone, which meant they were in good shape to study. But when it came time to excavate, archaeologists decided that taking CT scans and creating 3D models of the bones would be a better option to keep their remains intact and preserved. Instead of finding just a single bone, they had the sides of the face and roof of the skull, along with the brain case, the lower jaws, and part of the animal's massive wing. When they finally got a closer look, they found that the Caelestventus hanseni specimen had a whopping 112 teeth. That's some bite. They could also tell by impressions of the brain on the skull roof that even though the animal didn't have a great sense of smell, they would have had great eyesight, all the better to hunt with. But the revelations didn't stop there. After determining that Caelestventus hanseni was related to a dinosaur known as Dimorphodon, researchers realized not all members of the Dimorphodontidae family of dinosaurs had died out during the Triassic-Jurassic mass extinction event. Somehow, Caelestventus hanseni had survived long enough to make its way to modern-day Utah, where it remained for centuries before archaeologists made their unexpected discovery. Number 6. Therizinosaurus. What made archaeologists believe that the remains of a 70-million-year-old dinosaur belonged to an unknown giant turtle when researchers first found skeletal fragments of the Therizinosaurus in 1940 Mongolia? The enormous curved claws looked very much like those sported by ancient sea turtles. It wasn't until 25 years of further research that the fragments were identified as part of a group of theropod dinosaurs known as the Therizinosaurs, which means turtle-like. The animal would have been about 36 feet long, weighing over 3 tons, with forelimbs that measured up to 10 feet long. Their terrifying curved claws alone measured almost 3 feet long, but it would take comparisons to a related dinosaur to determine the origin of Therizinosaurus. Even though theropods were mostly carnivores, white meat, the shape of the skull, and structure of the jaws and teeth suggest that they mostly ate vegetation, using the long neck and flexible forelimbs to scavenge for food. After discovering Segnosaurus and Erlikosaurus in Asia and comparing them to Therizinosaurus, researchers realized they would have been able to disembowel a raptor or even a tyrannosaur. They were the longest claws of any dinosaur identified up until its discovery, and the longest claws of any animal in the history of life on Earth. Shockingly though, they didn't use these claws to hunt other dinosaurs. They were vegetarians who used these killer claws to gather dangling leaves and ferns instead. Not quite the deadly image we thought, as the largest identified theropod weighing only a few tons less than Tyrannosaurus rex. Therizinosaurus may have looked terrifying, but these plant eaters may have only used their enormous claws to intimidate so they could survive life 70 million years ago. Which of these prehistoric creatures do you think is the strangest? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 5. The Flying Protosaur. A primitive group of reptiles related to archosaurs known as Charovipteryx went extinct during the Triassic period, with no direct descendants today. It's difficult to determine where the Charovipteryx could have gotten its strange features. These gliding dinosaurs have back legs that are extremely long and connect to the tail and torso with a gliding membrane, similar to the wings of bats. But unlike bats, this membrane stretches from their hind limbs instead of their forelimbs, allowing Charovipteryx to glide using its back legs. There has only ever been one specimen of the dinosaur found in Asia, but surprisingly, it wasn't the only dinosaur with a strange method of flying. Another small reptile, known as the Longiscama, was a type of gliding reptile that had long external extensions of ribs that were connected by membranes, very much like the gliding membrane of Charovipteryx that went extinct after the Triassic period. There was a type of Pterosaurimorpha that lived in the early Triassic period, about 245 million years ago. Some believe they may have been related to pterosaurs, though pterosaurs didn't have the same membrane along their back legs. The lizard-like animal was discovered in 1971 by archaeologists, but with only one specimen. Researchers had to be extra careful when trying to get a closer look. When they did, they found some interesting details in the fossil, showing that Charovipteryx had wide 5-toed feet and long legs in proportion to the body. Skin impressions in the fossil show that they were covered in overlapping lizard-like scales on their body, but their wings didn't have scales. They were a small dinosaur though, stretching only about 8 inches long, with an extremely long tail, and weighing no more than 7.5 grams. Astonishingly, there were no other hind leg-based gliders around after the Charovipteryx went extinct. Some archaeologists believe they may have used their shorter and thinner front limbs to steer while gliding through the air. Researchers believe that the ancestors of the animal started out as climbers with enormously long back legs that splayed out from side to side. This is why they think their unique wing configuration would have helped them glide easier. Sadly though, they never made it past the Triassic period for us to learn more. Number 4. Longisquama. How are dinosaurs with only one fossil in the record so easy to distinguish? One dinosaur known as Longisquama, which means long scales, lived in the woodlands of Central Asia during the Middle Triassic period, about 230 to 225 million years ago. They were about 6 inches long and weighed only a few ounces, and were known to dine on insects. But the most distinguishing characteristic of this dinosaur is the fact that they were so small and had feather-like plumes on their back, a close relative to other small gliding reptiles from the Triassic period. Longisquama had structures that extended along their back, giving them a bit of lift when they jumped from branch to branch. There is still some debate over whether Longisquama was an ancestor to birds, which might explain their quills as something similar to feathers. But unfortunately, there has only ever been one fossil of Longisquama ever discovered. So until more fossil evidence is located, Longisquama will continue to be that strange reptile with feather-like plumes on their backs, even though some paleontologists originally believed that these so-called feathers were actually exotic plant fronds that were buried when the dinosaur died. The fact that they were so close to the fossilized spine means they were probably anchored deep within the skin and attached to the body. They also had a central filament that ran along the length, which leads experts to believe that they were constructed using the same genes that later produced feathers, even though one skeleton record is too incomplete to find out its exact position in the evolutionary map. Archaeologists think Longisquama was probably a pre-ancestor to pterosaurs, crocodiles, and birds. Number 3. Carnotaurus sastri. A dinosaur discovered in Patagonia has given archaeologists a jaw-dropping look at its fossilized remains, the well-preserved skin of a certain carnivorous dinosaur known as Carnotaurus sastri shows scientists a complex coat of scales, bumps, wrinkles, and more. The species is a type of horned abelosaurid called the Carnotaurus sastri, and when it was discovered in 1984, it was the first meat-eating dinosaur that was ever found with fossilized skin impressions that covered it from neck to tail. The different ridges and bumps on the animal resemble Australia's thorny devil, but in other places, the skin is a lot like the rough texture of elephant hide. After analyzing the discovery in close detail, archaeologists found the dinosaur scales were arranged in regular rows and were all about the same size. But strangely, large and randomly distributed studs were surrounded by some elongated, diamond-shaped scales that were scattered randomly across the dinosaur's body. Luckily, the remains of Carnotaurus sastri had the most well-preserved skin of any sauropod ever found, with 6 fragments of skin taken from the neck, the shoulder, the thorax, and the tail. Even though some of the smaller patches only measure about 20 mm in diameter, archaeologists were able to find tiny flakes of skin among larger scales that are similar to those found on tyrannosaurids. Still, that doesn't mean scientists know exactly why they had such a wide range of large and small scales, whether they were a type of body armor for protection, a way to regulate their body temperature, similar to African elephants, or just a way to display coloration on the animal. It's clear that the Carnotaurus sastri was unique in its own way. Number 2. Aramborgiania. In the 1940s, near a railway station in Jordan, a strange fossil discovered by a mine detector would end up becoming an important part of history. Discovered in Upper Cretaceous rocks that were weathery due to the elements, the 24-inch long bone was skinny, cylindrical, and very thin. Years later, it was determined to be part of the wing finger of a giant pterosaur, which was later named Aramborgiania. But did researchers get it wrong? Did they identify the wrong bone? It turns out that after additional research, the bone was identified as part of the vertebra and not a bone from the hand. By comparing it to other specimens, it was determined to be one of the largest Azdarchids. Stunningly, the animal is thought to have had a wingspan that stretched at least 7 meters, with its body measuring about 13 meters long. Other similar species were found in Cretaceous rocks around the world, showing they hunted prey on the ground, dining on amphibians, lizards, and small dinosaurs. This made Aramborgiania a large predatory creature, similar to modern-day large predatory birds like storks and shoebills that hunted in a similar way. But could it really be possible that this winged dinosaur was bigger than the Tyrannosaurus rex? Aramborgiania lived 65 million years ago as part of a group of reptiles that included pterodactyls. They had an unusually long neck and were close to the size of a small plane, more than twice the length of other gigantosaurs. The animal's neck would have been massive, but not very flexible, making it difficult for them to look around while they were hunting for prey, even though experts think they wouldn't have constantly flapped their wings while flying because it would have taken too much energy. Aramborgiania would have been able to soar for long periods of time and fly far when looking for food. With pterosaur fossils discovered from Eastern Europe to North America and into the Middle East and Asia, it's quite possible that Aramborgiania would have had a global range, allowing them to travel further than experts ever imagined, making it quite possible that more fossils of this strange creature will be found for further study. Number 1. Argentinian pterosaur. Paleontologists made a stunning discovery when they found bones in Argentina that belonged to the largest dinosaur to have ever lived. They were located in an area of Patagonia where dinosaurs known as sauropods once roamed. As a type of dinosaur with extremely long necks and elongated tails, sauropods, including the Brontosaurus and Brachiosaurus, also had small heads and legs that were short and thick like tree trunks. Researchers initially believed the bones belonged to a titanosaur, an enormous type of sauropod that survived until the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event that occurred 66 million years ago. An asteroid hit the planet and wiped out most living animals. Until then, titanosaurs thrived in a number of different areas in South America, including Patagonia, where these new fossils were discovered. While studying the proportions of pelvic bones and vertebrae that were discovered, scientists tried to determine whether this new dinosaur was bigger than the Patagonian, which was a larger type of similar species. By comparing the bones to previous dinosaurs discovered, experts believe that this one could be a different, larger species of sauropod that we haven't seen before. Studying the shapes of the vertebrae, including spines or spike-like appendages on the back, paleontologists are excited that the specimen could be a larger titanosaur that would have lived alongside smaller dinosaurs of the same species. The fossils are believed to be about 140 million years old, which would make this titanosaur the oldest and largest ever found worldwide. The discovery is also an exciting one that showed the titanosaur lived longer than previously thought, an incredible breakthrough that would have never happened if the pterosaur had gone undiscovered by eagle-eyed archaeologists. Thanks for watching. Which one of these prehistoric creatures interested you the most? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!